In a British residence in 2017, a horrific incident unfolded. Law enforcement responded to a call and discovered two young men, the apartment owner and his guest. One was so violent that the other required immediate hospitalization. The homeowner was in critical condition with bruises, lacerations, suspected concussion, and internal bleeding. Medical professionals feared for his life, yet he miraculously regained consciousness and answered police questions. Both medical and law enforcement personnel initially believed he was the victim until they inspected his mobile phone. What they found left them in shock. The man they assumed was the victim was, in fact, one of the most prolific offenders in British history. Early life of Reynhard Sinaga. Reynhard Tamash Maruli Tua Sinaga was born on February 19, 1983, in Jambi, Indonesia, to a wealthy family. His father, a successful real estate entrepreneur and banker, owned one of Indonesia's largest banks and a palm oil plantation. The family resided in a large mansion surrounded by luxury, where Sinaga's every wish was fulfilled. Growing up as a sensitive, shy boy, he was often isolated, spending time reading and playing musical instruments rather than forming friendships. As a child, Sinaga was academically gifted but not popular. Teased for his effeminate mannerisms and love for the Spice Girls, he faced bullying. Despite excelling academically, he remained an outsider. After graduating high school in 2001, he studied architecture at the University of Indonesia, where he blossomed socially, becoming well known for his vibrant personality. Journey abroad and student life in the UK. In 2006, Sinaga traveled abroad to continue his studies, initially enrolling in an American college. However, he soon changed his mind, citing dissatisfaction with the party culture. He returned to Indonesia briefly before deciding to move to the UK in 2007, where he began studying at the University of Manchester, earning 2 master's degrees. Now in Manchester, Sinaga embraced his true self and started exploring his sexuality. He formed a close-knit circle of friends with similar interests and enjoyed the nightlife scene. His family continued to fund his education and he lived a carefree lifestyle, unconcerned with money. By 2011, he had moved out of student housing into a small apartment in Manchester's gay village. However, his studies ended, and to avoid deportation, he enrolled in a PhD program at the University of Leeds, focusing his dissertation on South Asian men with non-traditional orientations in Manchester. A shift in personality and the beginning of the crimes. Around this time, Sinaga's behavior started to change. Becoming increasingly narcissistic and self-absorbed, he isolated himself from former friends, choosing to associate with casual acquaintances from nightclubs. He started living a double life, lying about working for Manchester United and City to maintain an image. Sinaga's life took a dark turn as he developed a disturbing habit of exploiting unconscious men who entered his apartment. Modus operandi in the crimes. Sinaga's attacks followed a similar pattern. He'd target young men outside bars and nightclubs, often drunk and separated from friends. Posing as a concerned bystander, he'd offer them water or a phone charger at his apartment nearby. Once there, he'd spike their drinks with a substance that rendered them unconscious. Sinaga meticulously recorded his assaults, amassing hundreds of hours of footage and photos from his crimes. He even kept personal items from his victims as trophies. From 2015 to 2017, Sinaga continued his assaults with alarming frequency. His demeanor, charming and harmless, allowed him to gain his victims' trust effortlessly. The majority of his victims, often young and athletic, were unaware of the horrific acts they had suffered. The fall of Reynhard Sinaga. In June 2017, Sinaga's crimes began to unravel. Peter, an 18-year-old, celebrating his exam success, was among his latest targets. After realizing he had been drugged, Peter fought back, injuring Sinaga in the process. When law enforcement arrived, they initially assumed Peter was the attacker. However, as they examined Sinaga's mobile phone, they uncovered a trove of incriminating footage. This shocking discovery revealed the full extent of Sinaga's crimes, with police estimating he had assaulted nearly 200 young men. Aftermath and trial. Sinaga's trial, beginning in 2018, was one of the most extensive in British history, with only 48 victims willing to testify. Videos of the assaults were presented as evidence, leaving no doubt about his guilt. In January 2020, he was sentenced to 88 life sentences, with the possibility of parole after 40 years. The case of Reynhard Sinaga is a dark chapter in British criminal history, highlighting the psychological trauma endured by his victims and the shocking nature of his crimes. Impact on the victims and the community. The full extent of Sinaga's actions left deep scars on his victims. Many of them were unaware of what had happened, with only hazy memories of an unsettling night. Some experienced psychological trauma upon learning the truth, leading to issues with substance abuse, depression, and even attempts to take their own lives. The shame and confusion prevented many from participating in the trial, as they struggled with the horrifying realization of what had been done to them. The shock of the case resonated beyond the victims. Manchester's nightlife scene, where Sinaga prowled for his targets, was left shaken, and many young men expressed feelings of betrayal, having trusted a seemingly harmless and friendly face. The news of Sinaga's arrest and conviction also struck fear into parents and communities, underscoring the dangers of trusting strangers and the importance of awareness and safety in social spaces. Legal and social repercussions. Sinaga's case led to increased discussions on the regulation of substances used in his assaults, specifically those that incapacitate victims, making them vulnerable to exploitation. Law enforcement and nightlife establishments were prompted to consider improved measures for identifying and protecting potential victims, especially those who may be intoxicated or in vulnerable situations. The trial brought renewed awareness to the broader issue of male sexual assault, with men often reluctant to report such crimes due to social stigmas and fears of disbelief. Sinaga's victims shed light on the unique challenges they faced. Advocacy groups rallied for more resources to support male victims, and many began speaking out against the cultural barriers that silence men who experience assault. Reynhard Sinaga's life in prison. Since his conviction, Sinaga has been kept under strict surveillance due to the nature of his crimes. The case garnered widespread media attention not only in the UK but internationally, especially in Indonesia, where his family faced social and personal fallout from the revelations. Sinaga's mother, in denial of her son's crimes, found it difficult to reconcile the image of her gentle, quiet son with that of the serial predator who devastated so many lives. His life sentences reflect the severity of his actions, and given the judge's decision to increase the minimum term to 40 years, Sinaga will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. For the families of his victims, his imprisonment is a necessary justice, though the emotional wounds left behind may never fully heal. Legacy of the case. The case of Reynhard Sinaga remains one of the most notorious criminal cases in British history, with a scope and scale that still shocks and horrifies. It stands as a reminder of the vulnerabilities that exist within seemingly safe environments, prompting changes in the way sexual crimes, particularly against men, are viewed and prosecuted. The case has catalyzed new approaches to victim support, particularly for male survivors, and has reshaped the dialogue around sexual violence, trust, and safety in social settings. Though Sinaga is now behind bars, his story remains a cautionary tale. It is a testament to the resilience of survivors, the persistence of law enforcement, and a community's resolve to confront the darker realities that sometimes lurk within society. Broader implications in the conversation on consent and power. The Reynhard Sinaga case sparked a broader conversation about consent, manipulation, and power dynamics within social interactions. His deliberate targeting of young, often intoxicated men exploited vulnerabilities in a way that forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about predatory behavior. His crimes underscored the need for individuals to exercise caution and for communities to foster environments where potential victims feel supported and protected. The case also illuminated the complexities surrounding the concept of consent, particularly when victims are incapacitated. The evidence captured in Sinaga's own recordings showcased that despite being unconscious and unable to consent, his victims were unknowingly subjected to traumatic experiences. This has led to stronger advocacy for clear legal definitions and better educational programs around consent, emphasizing that being unconscious or unaware automatically removes the capacity for consent. Law enforcement's role and challenges in handling male sexual assault. The Sinaga case brought to light some of the challenges faced by law enforcement in addressing male sexual assault cases. Historically, male victims of sexual assault have often encountered disbelief or insensitivity, stemming from societal stereotypes that stigmatize men who report such crimes. The Manchester police and court system took this case as an opportunity to highlight the importance of treating all victims with empathy and understanding, regardless of gender, and to recognize that trauma can affect people differently. As a result, law enforcement agencies in the UK and beyond have started re-evaluating their approach to male sexual assault cases. Many have initiated specialized training programs for officers, aimed at breaking down biases, improving victim support, and ensuring that male survivors feel safe and validated when coming forward. The goal is to create a safer, more accessible path for reporting these crimes without the fear of judgment. Ongoing changes in nightlife safety practices. In the wake of the Sinaga case, Manchester's nightlife venues have also taken proactive steps to increase security and protect patrons. Many clubs and bars implemented new protocols to identify patrons who might be vulnerable, particularly those who appear intoxicated or separated from their friends. Staff training has been enhanced to recognize signs of potential predatory behavior, and many establishments have partnered with local law enforcement to maintain regular security checks. Some venues have even started offering free phone chargers and water stations to help individuals who may be in vulnerable situations, reducing the need for patrons to rely on strangers for assistance. By implementing these changes, nightlife establishments hope to foster an environment where individuals feel secure and where patrons can rely on staff support if needed. A cultural shift in recognizing and supporting male survivors. Perhaps one of the most significant legacies of the Sinaga case has been the cultural shift towards recognizing and supporting male survivors of sexual assault. Traditionally, male survivors have faced unique obstacles in seeking support due to pervasive myths that undermine their experiences. However, Sinaga's case shattered these misconceptions, revealing the severe and lasting impacts that sexual violence can have on men. As a result, support organizations and mental health services have made concerted efforts to develop resources specifically tailored to male survivors. Advocacy groups have intensified their campaigns to educate the public, aiming to dismantle stigmas and ensure that male victims have the same access to help and justice as anyone else. The case has also encouraged men to share their stories, paving the way for a more inclusive conversation around trauma, masculinity, and recovery. The psychological impact and long-term recovery of the survivors. The psychological toll on Sinaga's victims has been profound and far-reaching. Many of the men he assaulted reported experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, and anxiety, struggling with the knowledge of what had happened to them while they were unconscious. For some, the assault disrupted their lives permanently, leading to difficulties in personal relationships, work, and overall mental health. Long-term recovery for the survivors has been challenging. Many have sought therapy to process their experiences, and support groups have been instrumental in providing a safe space for them to share and heal. By coming together, these survivors have found a sense of solidarity, knowing they are not alone in their struggles. The journey to healing is ongoing, but their resilience and courage in confronting these traumas have inspired others to seek help and speak out against similar crimes. Concluding reflections on the case's lasting legacy. The case of Reynhard Sinaga has forever changed the landscape of criminal justice, victim advocacy, and societal awareness surrounding sexual assault. His crimes highlighted the dangers lurking behind a facade of normalcy and shattered the notion that male survivors are immune to assault. Sinaga's conviction not only brought justice to his victims but also served as a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and resilience in the face of unimaginable horror. Though Sinaga will spend the rest of his life behind bars, the lessons from his case continue to ripple through society. His victims' courage and the dedication of law enforcement have inspired a shift towards greater awareness, prevention, and support for survivors of all backgrounds. The case remains a stark reminder that trust can be easily manipulated, but it also stands as a testament to society's growing commitment to safeguarding every individual's right to safety and dignity. A case study for future criminal profiling and forensic investigation. Reynhard Sinaga's case has become a critical reference point in the fields of criminal profiling and forensic investigation. His meticulous planning and methodical approach to targeting and manipulating his victims offer insights into the psychology of predatory behavior. For criminologists, Sinaga represents a unique profile, an educated, outwardly non-threatening individual who leveraged charm and intellect to exploit the vulnerabilities of others. His ability to evade detection for years due to his calculated methods highlights the importance of understanding the subtleties of predatory behavior, particularly when it involves exploitation in social settings. Law enforcement agencies and forensic investigators have since revisited protocols for identifying such offenders, refining their approach to detecting subtle indicators of repeated crimes. Investigations now place a stronger emphasis on digital forensics, given that Sinaga stored vast amounts of incriminating material on hard drives and mobile devices. The case underscores the need for vigilance in monitoring digital footprints and handling evidence when tackling complex and multi-layered criminal cases. Advancements in victim identification and outreach. The sheer number of victims in Sinaga's case made victim identification a massive undertaking. Police used photos and videos from Sinaga's devices to identify over 190 victims, a task made even more difficult as many victims had no recollection of the assault. This aspect of the investigation led to advances in how law enforcement approaches victim identification in cases involving memory-altering substances. Techniques such as facial recognition technology, as well as social media tracking, were instrumental in matching victims with their images in Sinaga's videos. Additionally, this case prompted a change in how victims are approached and supported, particularly in scenarios where trauma and societal stigma might prevent them from coming forward. The Manchester police developed new strategies to sensitively reach out to potential victims and provide them with resources for psychological and legal support. This victim-centered approach, acknowledging the trauma and unique challenges faced by male survivors, has since become a model in handling similar cases worldwide. Global awareness and the shift in attitudes towards sexual violence. The international attention garnered by Sinaga's case sparked a global conversation on the pervasive nature of sexual violence and the social stigmas attached to male survivors. In countries where male victims of sexual violence are often stigmatized, the case acted as a catalyst for dialogue on consent, trauma, and the barriers that prevent victims from seeking justice. Educational campaigns on the importance of recognizing and reporting male sexual assault have become more prevalent, aiming to break down harmful stereotypes and encourage a more supportive societal response. Advocacy groups worldwide have rallied to change perceptions about male vulnerability and to promote empathy and understanding across genders. The case has also encouraged communities to develop better resources for trauma counseling and support, addressing a long-standing gap in mental health services for male survivors of sexual abuse. Educational institutions' role in preventing similar crimes. Universities and educational institutions have become more proactive in implementing policies and resources that emphasize safe social practices and awareness of predatory behaviors. As Sinaga was a long-term student, living in a university environment where he targeted victims for years, his case brought attention to the need for educational institutions to adopt preventative measures. Many universities in the UK and abroad have introduced educational programs for students on recognizing manipulation and maintaining safety in social settings. Furthermore, universities have expanded their mental health resources and counseling services to better support students who may experience or witness incidents of assault. Awareness campaigns and self-defense workshops have also become common on campuses, empowering students to be vigilant and proactive about their personal safety. A sobering reminder of the need for vigilance in social settings. Sinaga's case remains a sobering reminder of the potential dangers present, even in seemingly safe and familiar social environments. His story underscores the importance of trust, boundaries, and self-awareness when interacting with others, particularly in nightlife or party settings where individuals might be more vulnerable. Many bars and nightclubs now emphasize bystander intervention training for their staff, empowering employees to recognize situations that may escalate and to take action if someone appears to be in distress. The public response to the case has also led to a growing emphasis on looking out for one another in social situations. Many people have embraced a stronger culture of care, with friends and acquaintances taking more active roles in ensuring each other's safety. This heightened awareness fosters a community approach to preventing assault, where individuals are more conscious of subtle warning signs and more willing to intervene when someone appears to be in danger. The lasting psychological legacy of Reynhard Sinaga's actions. For Sinaga's victims, the psychological scars may never fully heal. Many continue to grapple with the impact of his actions, navigating complex feelings of trauma, betrayal, and self-doubt. While some have found solace in therapy and support groups, others still struggle to reconcile their experiences. Sinaga's case has raised critical questions about the long-term psychological effects of trauma and the need for ongoing support for survivors of sexual violence. In a broader sense, Sinaga's case has helped reshape mental health discourse, promoting greater understanding of the effects of sexual violence on male survivors and challenging the taboos that often silence them. By shedding light on these issues, his victims have paved the way for future survivors to come forward, encouraging a more open, supportive environment where all victims feel empowered to seek help. Conclusion: lessons from a tragic chapter in British criminal history. The story of Reynhard Sinaga stands as one of the darkest and most complex cases in British criminal history. His actions not only left deep wounds on his victims, but also exposed critical gaps in society's approach to sexual violence and victim support. The legacy of his crimes has led to widespread changes, from legal reform and advancements in forensic science to cultural shifts in recognizing and supporting male survivors. Though Sinaga will likely spend the rest of his life in prison, his story serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and community in preventing similar crimes. His victims' courage in confronting their trauma and participating in the legal process has inspired a broader commitment to justice, safety, and healing. Through their resilience, they have left an enduring impact on how society views and responds to sexual violence, fostering a culture that values compassion, accountability, and the pursuit of justice for all.